Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. We are so excited that you are here. We are celebrating, it is August 1st, and so we are celebrating Black Philanthropy Month and our program, Black Philanthropy, Celebrating Black Philanthropy, an intergenerational conversation to social action. I am Erica Bradley. I am with the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven, and I just want to go over a couple of things that will help us today. So we are in webinar format, and so what that means is that everyone is muted. Your closed caption is on, or that, so you'll have that ability to toggle back and forth to closed captioning if that will help you enjoy the program today. And if you're having difficulties of any kind, just click down at the bottom into the chat. Any questions that you have for the panelists or any comments that you have, please put them in the Q&A feature. So again, we've got two options. One is the chat if you're having a problem, and then Q&A if you have a question for the panelists. We are doing this today in partnership with my good friends from the Fairfield County Community Foundation, the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving, the Prosperity Foundation, and again, the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven. So today, on behalf of our great leadership, Will Ginsburg from the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven, Mindy Blue Paca from the Fairfield County's Community Foundation, both are president and CEO of their organizations, Jay Williams, who is also the president and CEO of the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving, and then Orcella Hughes, who is the executive director of the Prosperity Foundation. We welcome you today. We're so thankful that you're here, and we hope you enjoy today's conversation. We're going to start today with a real treat from Andrea Deo. Andrea Deo is a retired police officer. She served over 18 years with the City of Waterbury's police department, and she's a highly decorated veteran within the department. She currently serves as the Chief State's Attorney, Division of Criminal Justice Community Engagement Board. She was the first female officer in the department's history, and she's highly decorated. She's also a licensed foster parent and helped develop a nonprofit organization called Brass City Cares, directly assisting the community throughout the year. Andrea is a proud member of the New Haven alumni chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, and she's on the board of the Waterbury PAL program, where she's also a mentor. She's also served as a mentor for the Delta Gems and Delta Academy, and that is with the Greater Waterbury Area Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. So she's going to offer us a song, a beautiful song, a rendition of Lift Every Voice and Sing, the first stanza of Lift Every Voice and Sing. And then after that, you will be brought into the conversation by none other than Dr. Leon Bailey, our moderator of today. Thank you so much. Andrea, you are muted, my dear.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We certainly can.
There was a fire truck and I did not want you to hear that. Okay. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as a rolling sea. Sing a song, full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us, facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won.
Thank you. That was fabulous. That was fabulous. So, in setting the tone and keeping consistent, are going to engage in a conversation about the intergenerational challenges around philanthropy, especially in this month designated as Black Philanthropy Month. And this was started actually by a friend of the community foundations across the country, but we have worked with her here in New Haven as well, Jackie Bouvier Copeland, a fabulous woman who is so ahead of her time that she is now working on an international foundation to helping people of color around the world. So I want to thank you, welcome you for being here, and let's just get into introducing our panelists, and I will call the panelists. They will come on screen and introduce themselves. And I think even though we're not related to the Baileys, and I are not related, but in some way we probably are, I'm going to leave them for last since it's a duo, and I'm going to Ratasha Smith. Ratasha, please come on screen, introduce yourself, and just mention your relationship to Black philanthropy.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ratasha Smith. I am the election productions coordinator at an organization called MoveOn. I am also a former employee of the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven, which really started my connection to philanthropy. It was my first job out of college, and I got to learn so much. And I always said I had a privilege of learning. I had a privilege of being from New Haven, and I had access through the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven to help my community. And that was really the first opportunity I got to do that. So I was excited to be there. And that is my first real connection to the world of philanthropy. Thank you all for having me.
Great. Ratasha, thank you for being here. Ty Richardson, will you please come on and introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ty Richardson. I serve as the president of the Delta Iota Sigma chapter of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated. And through our chapter, we started a nonprofit, Soweto Inc. Sigma Outreach Education Development. And that is where we use all of our philanthropic efforts. I also serve as the co-chair of the board of directors for Leadership, Education, and Athletics and Partnership in the city of New Haven. And so my chapter does work in both New Haven and Bridgeport. And then, you know, with LEAP, we do a lot of work with young people in the community. But I would say that my connection to philanthropy actually started at a very young age at Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church in the city of New Haven, through the leadership of our then choir director, Arcella Cooper Hughes.
Thank you. Vicki Gallen-Clark, would you be so kind as to introduce yourself and come on screen?
Thank you, Dr. Bailey. Vicki Gallen-Clark. I am the servant leader of Blue Hills Civic Association, also doing business that's building Hartford through community action. And as Ty talked about, my personal philanthropy started way back when, but specifically within the last 12 months, we have been so fortunate to be a steward of funds to actually partner with 28 community organizations and provide grants to them. And so we'll talk about that later.
Excellent. Thank you, Vicki. Welcome. Christopher Cloud, would you be so kind as to come on screen and introduce yourself?
Certainly, Dr. Bailey, it's nice to be with you and the other members of the panel for this exciting program this afternoon. Again, my name is Chris Cloud. I am a lobbyist, and I'm also a partner in my family's real estate development firm. And I think to answer your question, how I first got involved with philanthropy is, I guess you model what you see. And I was fortunate to have parents who were very engaged and involved in philanthropy at an early age. And that was my first introduction to philanthropy. More recently, and for the purposes of this panel, I happen to be the chair of the Black Giving Circle at the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving for the past 5 years. And I'm also Sire Archon of Beta Iota Boule, which has its own foundation and most recently just received $500,000 to create a program to support Black mental health for young men and boys throughout the greater Hartford region.
Yeah, no, that's a commendable program. It was in the news, and thank you for that. Thank you for that. Bernicestine Bailey, and then we'll have Harold introduce himself, please.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be here first with my esteemed panelists, fellow panel and sister panelists, and also to be able to address the audience on this occasion, Black Philanthropy Month. Just briefly, I guess my philanthropic involvement started with my parents as well, Mr. Cloud, and has gone on through the years. A lot of the work that both Harold and I have been engaged in philanthropically has been with Brown University, but I've also served on a number of boards in Fairfield County, and I've been the officer and or chair of some of those boards. So I have a long history. We are not actively working. I think most of our involvement now is volunteer. We have been doing a lot of work with the town of Westport as well through a group named Team Westport that we founded 21 years ago. And with that, I look forward to discussing further. With that, I'll turn it over to Harold.
Great, thank you. Harold Bailey, please come forward.
Pleased to come forward and delighted to be here, Leon. Let me just say that point of view, when we talk about philanthropy, it's the 3 W's: wealth, wisdom, and work. And in that sense, I mean, if you don't have the dollars, you can have the dollars, but if you don't have the wisdom, it doesn't make much sense. And if you don't have the work, it's going to go nowhere. So from a philanthropic point of view, as Bernicestine mentioned, I think mine started in my church when I was a kid, which is more decades ago than I want to relate right now, but it's moved on. And we did a lot of work at Brown, as Bernicestine mentioned, including getting a Black affinity group started, which has now got thousands of members, and getting the first Ivy League scholarship for students of color established several decades ago. And locally, we've been involved with Team Westport, which is a town's council for diversity focused on making Westport more welcoming with respect to race, religion, ethnicity, and LGBTQIA for the last couple of decades. Look forward to talking more about this as we go on.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Harold. So I'm Leon Bailey, Senior Vice President for Human Resources and Organizational Culture for the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven. And let me just say before we get into it, Lord help me, because the power on this panel, the presence of all of this agency, authority, knowledge, and wisdom is overwhelming. I want to be grounded in such a way that the thread that flows between us provides the listeners and participants in this group great value. And that's my prayer. Out loud, in the name and in the power of Jesus the Christ. Amen. Can somebody just say amen? All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And trust me, that's not a gratuitous prayer. It's a sincere request that the greatness that is reflected here emanates throughout the entirety of this webinar. And for those who listen to it later, we have over 270 something people registered. There are over 150 online right now. And the extent and reach of this goes far beyond where we can imagine and what we know. But I want to start the conversation with something that everyone touched upon in terms of either growing up with it, seeing philanthropy in their parents, getting it handed down, being, a part of it and growing up. With that in mind, how do we bridge this intergenerational gap with the very thing that we're faced with in terms of our youths today being in, I'm going to say, a different location than I'm familiar with, right? And it's a challenge. Vicki, I see you nodding your head, so I'm going to call on you first. And,
Sure.
because we have to manage this, if you could do hands or whatever, that would help me manage the process. But Vicki, please.
Absolutely. So, Dr. Bailey, we're the largest youth employer in the city of Hartford. And so we have the youth as our audience, especially during the summer, and their families. And so we provide actually financial literacy training, but with a twist as to asking them this very direct personal question: what is philanthropy? And are you a philanthropist? And if not, why not? And so it's having those intentional conversations with young people so that they can start seeing this from a broader view. I think a lot of people historically have seen philanthropy as an old white guy. And so they don't identify with that term. But when they start understanding that this could be something that they feel very passionate about, and that they have the power of one to influence others to become less self-absorbed and give back to their community, then it becomes alive for them. And so we start with something very basic, those conversations, tying it in with financial literacy training, and then giving back to the community. We have an annual cleanup where hundreds of youth get their friends and clean up the streets. And so people don't think about philanthropy in those terms of giving back to shore up, to make our community better. So I'll pause right there.
Great, Vicki. Thank you for kicking that off. Yeah, please, Ty.
Just to build off of what Vicki so eloquently stated, I think that philanthropy as a word is a big word. And sometimes when you hear a big word, you expect a major definition. And so growing up, a lot of the work that I was doing in the community, I never looked at it as philanthropy because I was a broke kid in Newhallville. And so through our program at LEAP, one of the things that we do is we really, push civic engagement. And how do you give back to the community? And how do you see yourself as a beacon of hope, but also as a conduit of change? And within that, understanding that the actions that you are taking, though you aren't wealthy, is philanthropy. But then I think going the step further of explaining the wealth portion and how you can accumulate wealth, utilize and leverage others to get the things that you need to continue your philanthropic efforts is what's important from an intergenerational standpoint. And I think that the beauty of that and the beauty of this conversation is shown there, right? You have people from different generations, different walks of life, all together talking about this one common thread that we have, which is to give back. But I think breaking it down a little bit and being able to say, hey, I know that's a big word, so you feel like that you're not doing that. But that young man that is in Bridgeport right now selling T-shirts and then using the money that he's raised to sell T-shirts to give back to those that are in this food desert that we call a city, right? That is philanthropy. But how do we help him to see himself in that way and then help him to navigate toward the funds that can have him do it on a larger scale?
I love that illustration, Ty. Thank you. And the work that leads to is, in fact, one of the ways and pathways in which we can get there.
Yeah, and I always try to tell younger people, we've seen this work at Brown because we were trying to develop, there are fewer, obviously, Black Brown alumni than the greater community. So we have tried to say it doesn't matter how much you give, just get into the pattern of giving. If it's $5, it does matter. You can't give 5 million. And I know you're intimidated because you say, I can't either, but I can't throw out that money. But as long as you can see that you're participating, and if you participate, then it'll get bigger and bigger. So if we can get across to folks that it doesn't matter how much, it's just that you're involved, and and it's not a matter of money necessarily. I mean, it could be time, it could be talent, or in other terms, wisdom or work that gets you the same place. The important thing is the impact, and that you're sustaining a cause or whatever over time. And that's the key thing. So it's not how much, it could be an hour of time you can give on a sustained basis. It's the fact that you're doing it that matters.
Yeah, you make a good point, Bernicestine, because when I think about, and folks on the panel may or may not relate to this, but when I think about when I was coming up and my grandmother was doing all this work at the church, and she would drag me and my brother to church with her to help clean up the church and do other things and make a place, that intergenerational work passed down to my brother and me. And right now we are compelled that as well. And so where is that bridge going forward? Where is that bridge to actually pass it on to current generations? Because I don't have to say this, that, and it's not going to surprise anyone, but we're living in some challenging times. And the networks that we grew up with are not present in the same way. I see you, Ratasha, you're up, and then Harold. And they're somewhat different. The challenge is somewhat different. How do we engage with that? Make a difference in that. Ratasha, please, and then Harold.
Well, civic engagement is close to my heart, and I have a 12-year-old son. So I knock, definitely during the election season like this, I knock doors. Jaden's with me. I go to rallies, the ones that are safe, because some are a little bit more safer than others. His first big rally was a March for Our Lives, and the National Urban League took a bus of us to Washington, D.C. And I have this awesome picture of him holding a sign, and he was so engaged. Now, as he gets older, he's 12 now, he's a little less engaged, and he's actually very engaged in the current election, but wanting to knock doors over playing on his phone is, hard to pull him away from the tech right now. But I do think it was important early on for him to see that, and I hope that when he gets older, he finds his way back to it. I don't want to force him to go to those things, but I think the natural things that I'm doing, if I just bring him along, it exposes him to that. I also try to encourage him to make his own, decisions, definitely in this political climate. I don't want to force my views on him, but I do encourage him to just listen and learn and think for himself. So I think it's just being an example.
Mm-hmm. No, that's really good. An important point about learning how to hear other generations. We have to put on a special listening, so that we're not dictating, to your point, Ratasha. Harold, please.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, just want to, and I very much agree with that about getting the kids involved. I know we used to travel from Boston down to Providence, and we started our Brown work, and Bernicestine would bring our 4-year-old and our 8-year-old along with her to meetings, so that this was inculcated into them when they were younger. But for in many cases, let's start with kids who, I call them kids who are out of college 5 years, who want to get involved in something. I know with some of the work we've done, leadership development is a major piece of the philanthropy that can be done. And that's critical for us as Black people in this country. So our focus has always been to not only act as the group that knows it all and can make things happen, but to make sure that younger people are involved in seeing how it's done, understanding what it is, and having some ownership of what happens as well. So that's, I mean, when you do that, the other thing it does for the older folks is it gives us a sense of here's what's important to them versus what was important to us. Because as you mentioned, that continues to change with each generation. And then you shape values and you shape initiatives around what's important to them and make sure that's included as well as what we know needs to get done over the long term.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And listening provides and informs our understanding of what's important. Vicki, you were up next. And then
yes, I agree with
Chris.
Ratasha. Is it Ratasha? Okay, I agree with you by taking them with you. So what we try to do with our young folks here at Blue Hills is to have them identify an issue that they're passionate about, have them do the research, and then allow them to go to city council or the state capitol to give personal testimonies about the impact. And so when they see that they're making an impact through the power of their voice, it makes them want to do it again and again. So that's one example. The other example, I have a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old grandson and a 6-year-old granddaughter. And so taking them out with me to provide sandwiches and bottled water to the homeless. And they're excited about that. When can we do that again? So it's taking our young people to the source where the need is and showing them how you can respond to that need. They get excited about that. So those are the two examples I want to share.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Vicki. Those are great examples. I mean, I have to think or remember the times my mother would take my brother and me to NAACP meetings where she would be in a meeting and we would be in the back doing our homework. But being so close and involved in the work, it sensitized us to what there was to do, how to be engaged. Yes, you had a hand.
Yeah, I did. Thank you. And I don't want to repeat all the good words that were said, but I do think it's important to remember that you can't be what you can't see, right? And so if there's an opportunity that we can create for young people to see, just look at this panel, you know, the diversity of the panel, the wealth of experience and knowledge, the boardrooms you sit in, the work that you do. It's important for our young people to see those examples, to see that it's not just about, you know, being a ball player or this, that, or some of the other social media influences that we see, but the everyday grind of African-American men and women who are doing good work in our community. I think that's incredibly important. And I also think creating opportunity for young people to be a part of those rooms and those conversations and those deeds gives them the inspiration that Vicki talked about to help them understand why this is of value, why this is important, and also the history of it. Multiple times it was mentioned about how folks learned in church. Church is the origins of Black philanthropy. And we've grown out of that history to do some of the great things that we're doing now. And so we should not forget that history and continue to create opportunities for our young people to see that and live that in their own lives.
Oh, Chris, I love that line. You can't be what you can't see. I'm going to use that, by the way. I hope it's not copied. That is so powerful and so true, because when you think about it, what are so many young people seeing? You know, and I'm not downplaying the videos and all the other stuff and the, you know, professional ball players or whatever, but that's a small segment of what life really is. And when we broaden that which can be seen, it's creating a whole other dimension of what's possible. And that's the beauty of who we are, what we have, and what we can create. Ty, you got a hand up, please.
Yes, I just wanted to also, as I'm thinking more about my journey and being in boardrooms, for example, as a young Black man or a younger Black man, because I'm
And you're still young, Ty. You're still young.
It is Black Philanthropy Month, so we can't talk about the work without talking about the struggles. And sometimes when you're in the room and you are responsible for making sure that the work that is being done, the dollars that are being done, the sponsorships that you're seeking are coming from people that truly care about the communities, right? or that can speak to the real struggle and understand the real struggle. And so I think that one of the things that I've had to deal with is sometimes the implicit bias that comes along, even from well-intentioned folks that are sitting on the board with you and sharing the calls with you, but not truly understanding, right? And having to explain to them. And then realizing that, well, I've had to learn how to navigate this world. And so I have to also prepare the young person that is coming behind me, because we are now viewed as gatekeepers. And a lot of times, if you're viewed as a gatekeeper in your community, you may be viewed as someone who is keeping people out. And I think that it's our responsibility to open that door, like Mr. Bailey talked about. But when you open that door, they have to be prepared to understand that it's not going to be easy. You're going to be at the table. You're going to be allowed to be at the table. And you know, you're there for whatever reason you're there for. But within that reason, there's a responsibility. And there's a responsibility sometimes to check the microaggressions. There's a responsibility sometimes to re-educate people, or to educate them for the first time, to teach them what they don't know because they think they know. All those things. But I think that part of my journey has been trying to figure out how to navigate that. And luckily I have a mentor like Mr. Bailey, who could say, hey, these are the things that I faced in board work. These are the things that I faced in philanthropy, because there's nothing new under the sun. It just comes out in a different form now. And so we have to be prepared. So we are fighting some of the battles that, were fought back in the 60s. It's just done in a different way, because now with social media, that those images and that information can be blasted to our young people and poison them in a much greater way, at the touch of a button. And so we have that responsibility, but I'm thinking more for all of us that have key decision-making roles. We do have a responsibility to sometimes in the room say, hey, you don't understand poverty from the realm of what these young people are going through. You don't understand, what they're facing from an educational standpoint. So it's not as simple as just get up and work hard, right? Let's talk about the systemic issues that they're facing, and then let's put our dollars to that in a real meaningful way.
So Ty, you opened up a can of worms. I'm going to pick up on a little bit of what you said. I'm going to put Harold Bailey on the spot, since you referred to Mr. Bailey being a mentor. And before you go, Vicki, I'm going to have you up next, and then go to Harold Bailey. The thing, Ty, that you mentioned that I believe is so important, that has to be lifted up. You talked about unconscious bias. You talked about microaggressions, which in the mainstream of this culture are not recognized. And for our young Black boys especially, it is so very important to understand that, because as Black men, you are not allowed to be angry publicly. You are not allowed to be angry publicly, because the moment you show a natural reaction, it invites, right? And so to get to beyond that has to be swallowed, managed, and address whatever is there to address. And that is a challenge that, like you said, it's an unconscious bias that's operating. Because anyway, I'm not going to go down that path, but that's a very important point that we had to learn. And yes, we have to teach, because if we don't teach it, we are watching the sustaining of a dangerous condition that threatens young Black lives. All right, I lost my place. I think, Harold, I was going to call you up, and then Vicki. Harold, please.
Well, yeah, I guess I'm on now. Good. It's just so important to make sure, as I mentioned before, we have young people really in the fold when we're putting these things together. And what we didn't talk about a little bit is politics. So I love what Ty was saying about calling out things that are a problem. This may sound crazy, but there are times when you don't want to call out things that are a problem yet. And you've got to pick the time to do it so that it makes sense and we don't end up in that position you just mentioned, Leon, which is where all of a sudden, that's an angry black man saying something. Now, I don't want to end up, as a milquetoast that's not getting it done. But you have to understand when you do it and how you do it. Sometimes you have to pull somebody aside after the meeting or at the break to talk to them, as opposed to doing it in front of other people. But you have to make sure it gets done. And having someone young along with you to see how that gets done is a huge thing for them. I've had a number of people mention that kind of thing. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that, Harold, because all this is happening in the background before we even get to what the issues are at stake.
Yes.
And we are the only ones aware of and sensitive to what's going on in the background. Really, it's a challenge. Thank you for that, Harold. I think Vicki, you were next, and then Ratasha.
I wanted to really go back to what Ty was saying, the responsibility that we have. I believe that none of us are in the positions that we're in by coincidence. I think it's all been divinely orchestrated first and foremost. And so, there's a saying, too much is giving, much is required. And so how do we use our voices in the positions that we're in to open the doors for others, whether it's our younger generation coming up, whether it's other peer organizations? When you look at the foundations, 92% of the top executives are white. And so they use the friend of a friend privilege. All I have to do, let me just call Joe over here. Let me just call Tom, and it happens. And so how do we take advantage of the positions that we're in to open doors for people who look like us? That's a responsibility. And then we show young people how to use their voice again to open doors, so we keep that legacy going generation after generation after generation.
Thank you. I love that, because if, to your point, Vicki, no one sees what we see, and if we don't do it, it will not get done. Very simple, very simple. And that is the obligation, I'm going to say, embedded in Black philanthropy. It has to happen. It has to happen. See what you started, Ty? We were having, anyway. Tasha, please, and then Bernicestine, get ready.
I too am going to echo what everyone said, but I'm going to give some examples right here in this room before I get to right in this room. Actually, a lot of my philanthropy, I'm still part of the National Urban League, and that came to me. I had expressed to someone you all might know, Jesse Phillips, that I really wanted to get involved. I had landed my job at the Community Foundation. I wanted to do something. I had all these ideas to help my community, and I didn't know where to put them. I remember I had tried to pitch some ideas, but I didn't have any titles behind my name, so I don't think anyone really took me seriously. And then Jesse Phillips brought the opportunity to me. He'd heard me. So when the opportunity to restart the chapter for the Urban League Young Professionals in the city of New Haven came along, I was on his mind. He sat down with me, and I was able to relaunch that chapter. So that was really where I really, got some momentum. And I just came back from the National Urban League Conference a few days ago. So I'm still involved in this organization. Then on top of that, at the Community Foundation, I'm going to make Leon blush a little bit. Me and Leon used to meet once a week. And it's funny, in the beginning of our conversations, he said, by the end of these conversations, I'm going to hate him. Because Leon, you guys get nice, Leon. I got tough love, Leon. And I think that was so important to have his mentorship in the beginning of my career to navigate a space such as the Community Foundation. It's my first real big girl job, so I didn't want to make too much noise, and I was supported by people like Leon, who was willing to take the time out of his day to have those tough conversations with me and challenge my thought process, and help build some courage and learn to assert myself. And then on top of that, there's so many other people at the foundation. I talk to Deb to this day. She's like one of my best friends to this day. and having that support, or I'm just going through stuff then I was 20 something year old, and I'm going through life stuff, trying to balance my career and trying to be impactful in my community, and having a son all at the same time. And then people like Joanne, who was just there as a support system. So I had this major support system. So when we talk about keeping the door open, not only did they keep the door open to me, they supported me through that process. And without mentors along the way, I wouldn't be here like where I am now. I wouldn't be able to, to do the things I do now. And now I'm getting to a place where it's my turn to kind of give back. I had this young girl from the conference I just left reach out to me, and she wants to get civically engaged. And I said, well, when I get back, we'll have coffee and things like that. And people are starting to come up to me to be their mentor. I know I'm a little on the younger side, but not too young. But it's refreshing. So I think it goes back to what Ty says. We have to, people open the door for us, and we have to keep that door open.
Well, Ratasha, thank you for the acknowledgement. I appreciate that. And just to underscore it and what it's all about, we have to take on speaking to the greatness that's in each and every one of us. In the normal course of things, rarely do we have an experience of folks speaking to our greatness. But we are all here because someone spoke to that in us, right? And that's exactly what you're pointing to, Ty, different words, exactly what you're pointing to, Harold. That is what it takes. And unless I see and look at and engage your greatness, what did you say, Chris? You can only be what you can see. And if I see you only as your greatness, the probability of is dramatically different. Oh, I'm sorry. No, Chris, I apologize. Bernicestine did have her hand up. She took it down. My apologies, Bernicestine, and then Chris, you're up. Come off of mute, Bernicestine. You need to come off of mute.
I'm sorry, I took it down because I thought I was on. But just going back to the conversation, Ty and Harold, a lot of, once you're in that room, it could be, well, it took us years because we started in 1980s of building trust, because, okay, you're there. I'm hoping it's a little bit easier now, but it took persistence. And I still think that no matter, even if we are in today's world, it still takes persistence and in order to gain the trust of the other folks in the room who don't look like us. And often you have to, in negotiating, you have to make it a win-win situation where what will be a win for us, people of color, will also be a win for everyone. And I guess my best example that I can think of right now was Brown in the early 2000s typically was following their fundraising model. They kick off a fundraiser by inviting the well-to-do, and they'd have 100 big donors or whatever. I'm just using an arbitrary number. And they would invite them to this event in New York. And so we said, no, why don't you start the campaign on a more inclusive basis? Invite, everybody who can get to New York City. And so from the beginning, we feel like we belong and that our participation is warranted. And so they said, okay, we'll try that. We'll postpone the big event, the event for the big donors until later. But they did open it up at the Museum of Natural History, I think it was. And it was a big success. So, it's a way to start the campaign. So my point is, it was a win-win for us to try to get folks of color included in knowing, in giving back, giving money, but also it helped Brown, the institution in general, because they had greater participation and greater acceptance, going out of the blocks. So just wanted to say that. And also I'm very encouraged, changing wheels a little bit. Very encouraged by the energy over the political scene now, and I'm seeing younger folks get involved, and maybe that is a way to grab them for the future. But that's encouraging. That's all I have to say on that. So thank you.
Oh, no, you said a lot, Bernstein.
Well,
with very few words, you spoke volumes, because you're absolutely right. And not to get into the whole political scene, we need to be mindful of that and have an awareness of what's going on, because that creates the context within which we're operating. It has a lot to say about how we engage and how we must engage, because to sit idly by and just watch things unfold has us be the victims of, rather than active participants, to the extent that we can, in fact, create change. Other ways of impacting upcoming generations, because these are different times. These are different conditions. The political demands, as we all see, have a draw in and of itself, and it requires a different level of intellectual engagement. It's not the passive activity that it used to be. Not that it was ever really passive, but you get the point. The engagement is more demanding because there's so much more at stake.
And I think it's more in our face now, too, because of technology. One of the considerations is that, how technology makes it easier or not to engage in philanthropy. It's much more easy to collect money if money is what you're giving. It's much easier to solicit help. More organizations are online and more pushing out messages to folks. So it's almost hard to avoid being involved. But the key thing is to find whatever cause it is that gives you that passionate energy. Ours have been education, arts and culture, history, historic preservation. And those are the main drivers, but it's up to everybody to find something. And I think it's easier to find whatever those vehicles are than it had been in the past.
No, that's right. That's right.
We aren't confined to our local areas. We can
exactly, because it's now a larger scheme. Plus, other countries are
yes.
into the mix. Chris, I overlooked you. Please forgive me. I want you to step up. I'm sorry.
That's fine. I just thought that a few things. I wanted to bring it back to the subject matter of the panel by way of an example, and the importance of being in the room and having the relationships to leverage philanthropy in a meaningful way. And I can best do that by sharing a small story on how we at the Black Giving Circle and Beta Iota Boule and the Hartford Foundation partnered together. 3 Black men, myself, Paul Mounds, who at the time was the chief of staff for Governor Lamont, and Jay Williams, came together with an idea that took a concept and led to $1 million gift for Black mental health and wellness for boys throughout the greater Hartford region. And I think it's an important story to tell because it encapsulates the value and the benefit of not just being in the room, but leveraging your philanthropy through your relationships, like so many other groups have done over time. And we're kind of slow to the race. I forget who said it, but we are kind of, the gates open and we're kind of catching up, but we're learning quickly, right? As we always do as Black and African-American people. So when the federal government had all of that ARPA funding out there, the state of Connecticut got millions and millions of dollars. And some of it was for mental health and wellness. And communities like ours were not getting a great deal of that funding. So Paul Mounds and I happened to have a conversation, who is also a member of our Boule. All 3 of us are members of the same Boule chapter. We talked about it, and he said, you know what, Chris, I'm going to make sure that Beta Iota gets $500,000 to be able to address this issue. So we took that, we were very grateful of that. And then I called my dear friend Jay Williams and said, Jay, I've got $500,000 and I don't know what to do with it. And Jay said, well, I'll tell you what, Chris, I'm going to match that and I'm going to give you $1 million and we're going to make it last for 2 years and we're going to give it away to Black and brown Black communities in and around Greater Hartford, and we're going to make a national model, which we have now done. And I share that story only to say that that never would have happened had we not been in the roles and the positions that we had we not been communicating with each other, having the same concerns and cares about our community and the young Black men that we deal with on a daily basis. So I'm kind of touting it and I'm very proud of it, but it's a great example of how you leverage philanthropy in a meaningful way to a greater and higher purpose, and this whole intergenerational component that we were asked to talk about here today. So I hope that is a decent example of how you can move philanthropy in the right way.
Chris, that's more than a decent example. Will you cut it out? That is far-reaching, extensive, replicable, right? And an illustration of, if not you, then who? There was no one in line behind you all to do this for our people. And so in the
If not who,
context of,
not
I'm sorry?
If not us, then who? You're absolutely right, my friend.
Because, you know, the value of Black philanthropy is exactly what you described, because others cannot see it. Just like Ty was talking about unconscious bias. It can't be seen if, what was your line before? You can't be what you can't see. And if I were to flip that statement, they can't see what they choose not to be. Taking a little editorial license there.
Amen, Reverend. Amen.
Cut it out. Cut it out. We'll do a collection later, but thank you for that. Harold, please.
While we are focused on the things that we're doing in each one of our organizations and our involvements, I just think it's important that we understand that we talked about politics a little bit. I'm not trying to take us off this, but there is a movement underway right now to basically discredit anything that has to do with a Black identity or a Hispanic identity or an identity that's other than white. And that's where we get this colorblind thing that's going on. You take a look at what's just been done with respect to admissions at college universities, where they specifically outlawed a consideration of race. Take a look at the lawsuit that happened against the hedge fund, I think it's in Atlanta, that was focused on Black women businesses, where you could actually be sued for that. And we've got a Supreme Court that's about to uphold the ability to sue somebody over that. So I just think we ought to be mindful of trying to structure whatever it is we're doing in such a way that it's sustainable beyond some of these onslaughts that are out there like that. This whole thing about DEI and CRT and so on, it's not something that just kind of happened with happenstance. It's a consolidated plan that's been put in place. We talk about 2025, all those other things. So we got to keep those things in mind when we're looking at how we're gonna steer things into the future, so we don't end up with our legs cut out from under us. I just think that awareness is very important.
Oh, Harold, you make such important points, because everything you're pointing to is operating in plain sight. There are no secrets about those activities taking place, and the impact that we will be left living with is huge. Not to be taken lightly, not to be overlooked. Spot on, Harold. Thank you. Vicki, please, and then Ratasha.
So, Chris, thank you. We're coming back to you can't be what you don't see, because that's so critical. And so I want to make sure that we, as a Black family, actually show our young people how we support each other, even in the words that we choose with one another. And I believe in changing the narrative. So I don't know if you all have ever heard of the statement, Black people can't work together. And so whenever that starts, I have to change the conversation, because I tell people we're proving that to be a myth every single day. So we have to number one, demonstrate to our young people a new narrative, and then demonstrate that in our words and our actions, so that this whole thing about Black on Black crime and things like that, that can change, okay, this Black hate. So within our family, we have to change that narrative, and we have to show the positive example. When I was growing up, my mother and father, they were both from the South. We weren't allowed. They told us explicitly, you don't talk negatively about other Black people. I remember that coming from their mouths. And so I grew up with that, knowing that we uplift one another and not put each other down.
That is so important, because yes, we are a family. Whether we have the same name or not, we're related. And that connection actually is what's going to get us to a whole other place. Thank you for that, Vicki. Thank you. Ratasha, and then Ty.
Speaking more about the DE&I narrative, I'm frankly disgusted about the current DE&I narrative, especially against Black women. There's no Black woman along my career path that I've met that didn't work hard for their spot. And a lot of women are the ones that got me civically engaged, starting with Congresswoman Adams, who will actually be my congresswoman due to gerrymandering here in North Carolina, but she was also at Bennett Bell, where I started my college career. She is the one who engaged us at Bennett College to vote in 2008 for President Obama, the first Black president. Then moving on, when I came home to New Haven and I was a reporter, I got to follow the mayoral race after having a white man and mayor for 20 years. We had a diverse mayoral race where Toni Hart was the first Black woman mayor of the city of New Haven, I believe also just woman. And they worked hard for their spots, both of those. Now we're seeing what we see at the top of the ticket now, and it just shows that representation matters. So when I hear this DE&I narrative, it's frankly disgusting. Definitely after some of the remarks, we won't get too political remarks I heard yesterday, I thought that whole display was just insulting. But beyond that, I'm finding it hard. And then listening to you, Vicki, I'm finding it hard to combat that narrative. I know I've worked hard for where I've gotten. And again, I have a son, and I'm finding it mentally challenging, this election cycle, and just being in this political work to keep combating these narratives, and not even just in politics, just throughout the whole career in the nonprofit space. And, it's just, I'm finding it mentally challenging, and I'm opening the floor for dealing with that. It's something, especially over these last 10 days, that it's just beating me up a little bit. I like you said, we have a lot of excitement. I'm more excited than I've been in years. I mean, I love politics, and I was doing what I needed to do, but there's this new energy. Definitely when we saw all these Black women here on this call, or 44,000 Black women raise over $1 million in less than 24 hours and things like that, it's super exciting. But on the other end of that, you just feel beaten down, especially in the internet and social media and these comment sections. It just continues to tear at you. I think it is something about building community among us. Sometimes we have to be the ones that have us and support us, and I'm hoping for that. But it's beating me up a little mentally.
No, Ratasha, you are pointing to a very important point, because there is a psychological impact that affects us all. They actually have a name for it. It's our allostatic score. Thank you, Natasha Ray, for teaching me about that. And our allostatic score is where we contain the stress that's the result of racial biases. And it adds up, adds up, adds up. And yes, it can be addressed, it can be treated, absolutely. But that's part of what's operating. with us that actually could use attention. So I'm gonna go to Ty. Ty, don't start a whole nother thing because you do that. With the last question, you just start a whole series of thinking, and I'm actually acknowledging you in a backward sort of way. Ty, and then Bernicestine, and then we're gonna pop over to Erica, who's gonna, use some of the time before we run out of time to present some of the questions that were brought up in the Q&A and the chat. So Ty, please, and then Bernicestine after Ty.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of pick up where Ratasha left off and just talk about like the idea of the concept of the power of we. Like when we think about philanthropy and we think about the messaging that we want to send to our young people. I'm a juvenile probation supervisor by day. That's what I do. I eat, sleep, and breathe it. And so often we talk to our young people about like not infighting and not beefing with each other and not operating as gangs. But then when they see us do our philanthropic work, it's like me in my lane with my boys and we doing our work. My fraternity, we're doing our work. Then you got the other fraternity doing their work, a sorority over there doing their work. And we're all doing great work. And so what I realized a few weeks ago is we gave out $14,000 in scholarships this year. And another organization gave out $14,000 in scholarships. And there was one young Black male that received a scholarship from each of our organizations. And imagine if we were communicating with one another. Imagine if we came together and pooled our money together, right? The funds that we raised from the community, we pooled that together and there was an open scholarship. And we could have served more young Black boys if we had been communicating and not operating in silos. And so while it's good to do individual work at a high level, it's even better to do collective work at a high level. And I think that's, kind of what Chris pointed to in that connection that he was able to make to leverage the connections that he have. We're all friends. We all do work together. We hang out together, but then we get into our silos when it's time to give. And if we can duplicate that, if we can look at it as a standpoint from the standpoint of we're each running our own marathons. Phi Beta Sigma is running this marathon. Boule is running this marathon. The Masons are running their marathon. The Qs are running their marathon, as opposed to we can be collectively running a relay. And so in those moments when you start to face that fatigue, you have somebody that you can pass the baton to, that you trust, that can pick it up while you catch your win. And that thing is coming right back around to you. And so I think that when I view philanthropy and where we can go to the next level from an intergenerational standpoint, that's where it's at. We have to stop running our individual marathons and get into this relay together. I've known of Ratasha for years. Never been in the same room as her, but I can run you her whole resume, and we have to find avenues to bring the right people together, such as this. And so how do we do that is really what we should be looking at and attacking, and then moving forward from there. Just my personal opinion.
I like your opinion, Ty, which means we probably have to do this sort of webinar again fairly soon with similar themes to keep the family connected. Because, as much as we might want to do our own thing, let me tell you, systemically, it affects us all because of who we are. So it's inescapable. And to collaborate on the very thing that's operating adversely makes so much sense. So much sense. Bernicestine, and then we're going to go to Erica.
I'm going to yield to Harold.
Yeah, she was putting up her hand for me, I think. Are we okay? Okay, just wanted to answer one thing, because the question that popped up to the last two responses is, how do we handle this stuff? What do we do? And the point that really Ratasha had about how it eats at you and what's been going on. This is bottoms up as well as top down, the stuff that's going on right now. There are memes that are being transmitted out on DEI, CRT, and all these other things And all of a sudden they appear everywhere. And then you have board members walk into the room and they're talking some of the same stuff. Well, there's an issue with equity all of a sudden. What are you talking about? Equity's been the same thing for the last 2,000 years. All of a sudden it's something different because somebody has defined it as different and communicated that meme to all over to certain political parties, to business councils and so on all over the country. I think it's really important for us to talk together. We got to share this stuff and understand it's happening to every one of us. And as we come up with answers to these things, we can by talking, we find out what's the best approach to take to each one of these memes when they start to hit, to back people up and get them to back off some of the paths they're heading down, which is to shut down giving, shut down being concerned, talking about things like identity politics. My identity cannot be politicized. That's core to my humanity. So how in the heck is somebody going to come in and say that? Because let's look at what happened yesterday. Because we're talking about somebody who is, a combination of Black and Indian. All of a sudden, that's identity politics. That's who she is. Being Black is who I am. So when you start putting that in the political realm, you have taken who we are and completely demeaned it to a whole nother level. And we need to start talking about how we really back people up on that kind of thing. And what do you say? So I'm hoping that as organizations, we can have discussions like this, but we also ought to be talking to each other to try to give each other some comfort about and some guidance on how to handle some of these things.
Harold, thank you for that. Excellent point. Excellent point. Thank you for that. Erica, will you please share with us what's been coming up in the Q&As?
Absolutely. I'm just going to read the ones that are in Q&A because there's some great conversation in chat too. But what is the biggest challenge in growing your impact? Often great programming is not as effective as it could be without discoverability. Do you work with local media partners to amplify your work and voices? If so, how?
Who would like to take that on? Chris, I'm going to put, go ahead, please, Chris. And I saw your hand, Harold.
It's okay. I'm happy to take it on. The uniqueness of the partnership that we've created is that there was the backroom staff, the media opportunities, the wherewithal to do, I think, a better job collectively than we would do independently. And the value, and I put in the chat too, that, one of my challenges to this group, this, collective group of panelists and the community foundations who put this together, if they don't have Black giving circles, to think about creating Black giving circles, to Ty's point, because we are much greater together, right? To be able to pool your resources, pool your money, pool your skill sets, to be able to create a much larger impact, whether that's through the media, social media, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's how we were able to work with it. We've done op-eds, we've done social media, we've done billboard, print media, et cetera, et cetera. And they were actually very open to the idea of accepting some of the things that we put out in the media. And that has blossomed for us. So I encourage folks to not be afraid of that idea, but just, write an op-ed, talk about the issues that are pertinent in your community, and you'd be surprised what kind of uptick you can have from that.
Can I piggyback on that, Erica?
Absolutely.
And so we are not a foundation. We are a community-based organization that happened to be the steward of funds because of a community leader in our area. And so what we did, we first of all met with the organizations that we were going to support. And outside of the financial, we made a commitment to each other to, number one, get a chance to know one another, to be intentional about knowing each other. It's amazing that you can work in the same city and not know one another. So we agreed that we were going to be intentional to get to know one another. That was the first thing. And then we said that we were going to be intentional about supporting each other's work. So you're having an event here, so I'm going to be right there partnering with you. You're having your anniversary there. Guess what? We're going to have representation there. And so that has been the journey, that intentionality, because we do believe that we're stronger together. So getting to know one another, bypassing all the things that you may have heard about the person, but you know them for yourselves. It's building collaboration, intentional collaboration.
Awesome. Next question. How do we, at the local level, combat the negative impacts of social media? So much information available to our youth to the point that many have reported being desensitized or don't want information that is contradictory. Really challenging considering how quickly social media and technology has advanced.
One of the things that we do with our young people, so we have a mentoring group within our organization in Sigma, but also at LEAP, one of the things that we do is we have youth development sessions. And in those sessions, we're having conversations, like real world conversations about what's going on. I think we have to be mindful, as Harold pointed out, mindful of how AI is being used to transmit messages, and it looks like it's the actual person sharing the information and all of that. But getting back to fact-based conversations, and sometimes what happens is with politics, especially, emotion-based conversations rise to the top. And we have to be willing to sit down with our young people and have fact-based conversations, explore their perspective as well, because they're dealing with the same brain drain and mental fatigue that we're dealing with. And so we have to have the patience to have that dialogue with them and not just pass it off as them not wanting to be engaged, but really exploring what is it about this experience that is leading you to back away from the table? And how can I dispel some myths? How can I help you navigate that?
I kind of second that in the sense of, I know I put the question on the table earlier, but it's so quick in this time to just run with false narratives. And I too have been challenging myself to research and going on using AI. It's something as simple. What I've been doing every time I see a comment that I'm like, did that really happen? I put it in Chat GTP and I ask Chat GTP, is this true? And it breaks down what is truth, what is false, and it gives me sources. And it's simple as that. Before, spouting my opinion in a comment section that I'm just unaware. So I just challenge everyone to just breathe and do your research, because these narratives are going around and it's like wildfire. And I think it's so divisive, some of these things that are going around. And I think social media is trying to put things in place to, combat this. But like you said, information is going too fast. And I think we all just need to take a breather and do our research before we spout information that we haven't fact checked.
So we're coming upon the our closing hour, so I don't think we can get to everyone. So please forgive me for picking through, but I want to mention this one. It sounds like creating momentum for activism among young people is a big priority for you all. Aside from direct education like scholarships and one-to-one mentoring, can you speak to your goals in creating broader impact among young people?
I would like to jump in because we have a community organizing and community outreach department. And so our young people are trained to be youth leaders, and knowing the responsibility of being a youth leader, becoming civically engaged, neighbor watching out for neighbor, being the model that you would like to see, learning how to speak at these public events, as I mentioned before, the city council, the Capitol. So again, doing their research as far as voter registration, the importance of voting. So that's critical for young people to be able to become civically engaged and then give back to their community. So it's very intentional. It's a training process. We also work on getting their parents involved in that process. So it becomes a family affair.
Okay. Vicki, thank you for that. We are just about at the time to wrap up. It breaks my heart to end this conversation. And we're going to get together again. I'm not sure how or when, even if I have to pay for lunch or something. We are going to do this. It's been too rich. I'm serious. I'm not making this up. And I have to say, my prayer at the beginning was more than answered. It was so much more than answered. And I just want to, from the bottom of my heart, thank each and every one of you for your presence, your contribution, your engagement, and your commitment to this larger issue. Yes, Black Philanthropy Month, but we know it is a lifestyle and not a month event. It's stepping into a life that we have been destined to live because of where we came from and who we came from. I don't know about you, but my grandmother, my mother wouldn't have it any other way. And in many ways, I have exceeded their expectations. Thank you, God. This is reflected in who we all are. And this is the conversation in that context that we had today. And I just want to thank you for bringing that conversation to this place and space so that we could play in this thinking, in this context together. What a gift, what a blessing. So thank each and every one of you. And before we wrap up, I'm going to turn it over to Sire Anderson, my good friend up in Hartford, to take it to the next level. Sire, please.
Thank you. This has been such a rich discussion, and on behalf of the committee, we say thank you. We've been collaborating for the last 3 years, and we are so grateful. And I think every year the discussion gets better and better and better. So please, as this is the start of August, Black Philanthropy Month, please continue your philanthropic efforts and continue the discussion. Thank you.